And there it
Oh.
is, live, coming to you from all over the world. We have an excellent panel for you today. This is, I believe, called I Know Kung Fu. And we are talking about fight scenes in lit RPG and or in writing in general. So what I'm going to do first of all is we are going to have each of our panelists give their spiel about who they are, what they do, maybe what they're working on, and tell us a little bit about themselves. So Jack, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here among such illustrious company, including yourself. Yes, and hello, everyone. I'm Jack Fields. I'm the author of the Walking Shadows series. The first novel, here it appears, Scarlet Citadel, came out a little while ago, and its audiobook, narrated by Neil Helligers and Tess Irondale, is coming very, very soon. And I'm thoroughly excited about it. So yeah, that's me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jack. Tao, why don't we start it off, or second off it with you?
My name's Tao Wong. I have written a lot of work, most famously or well known in this genre for The Thousand Li and The System Apocalypse, as well as The Adventures of Brad.
Awesome. Awesome. Rose?
I love Brad, by the way. I always thought it was Brad. I was like, yeah, Brad, why not? Sorry, it's probably really common. I'm Rose Reynolds. I write progression fantasy and a little bit of slutty stuff. You got to do the research to find out my second pen name. I'll keep it chill. I wrote a bigger book than Jack. I'm sorry. Also, I forgot to say, hey, CM Carney, I think this is the first time we got to chat. That's it. I'm signing off. You didn't hear me? You did not hear me. Chris.
Okay.
Never.
Can you hear CM?
No one knows.
I think he's having technical issues.
Seems like it.
All right. Well, we'll try with Evie.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Aoife Y, and I write stories with my awesome co-author Rachel. I think she's probably in the chat there. And our most recent work, working on a couple of different things, but the most recent one at the moment is the Titan's Core. It's basically a tower climber isekai inspired by the likes of Squid Games and kaiju monsters. So we've got book one drafted. It's up on. We're dropping chapters like twice a week on Royal Road at the moment, and all going well, it'll be published next year it's going to be a trilogy all over, published by Beach. So also I'm absolutely delighted to be on this panel with so many great folk that inspire me over the years as well. So that's me.
Awesome, fantastic. And CM, why don't you finish us off? If we can hear you. The mute is coming up.
Chris, you gotta be.
You have to. Your mute is still on. It's still on.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Yep.
Now we got it.
I'm CM Carney, author of The Realms and The Quintessence, and eventually coming out of Arthurian middle grade. You can hear a very long kid series called Nightman and Page. My co-author, I plan on holding. We have 3 books before that comes out. I'm almost very smidge end of Okay to the Realms Doom Vault, which has been a long time in coming. And my first Kickstarter ends today. It's a very small one, kind of testing the waters for a new audiobook and print version of my novella from Old Realms called Dead Must Die. It has funded, but I did have a very low funding goal, so mostly because I wanted to figure out how the whole thing worked. But I think I'm going to kickstart Doom Vault as well when that comes out, which should be going live next month for the Kickstarter, and then the book should be out by January. I'm excited about that.
That is awesome. Well, thank you everyone for being here. And I, of course, am Steve Campbell, audiobook narrator that has had the opportunity to work with a couple of the authors on this panel, but hopefully more later on. Now, what we're talking about is fighting in books. How do you make it awesome? How do you make it realistic? How do you make it interesting? And is it something that you spend a lot of time thinking about? What I want to do to start breaking the ice on this, and hopefully Jack will be able to pop back in when he's available, is asking you, there you are, Jack, asking each of you if you have ever personally been in a fight before yourself. So that's where we're going to start to break the ice. Tao, why don't we start with you?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
No, I mean, I practice a lot of martial arts. I've been in a lot of sparring situations. I've been in altercations a couple of times, not in over 20 plus years now, mostly because part of training is learning how to diffuse a situation before you have to go and, throw hands. I am I'm much happier with that rather than, ending up injured.
Okay, just a sec. I'm going to jot down. Do not fight with Tao. Okay. All right. So, secondary question to that is, have you ever been punched in the face?
Oh God, so much. I mean, I do sparring, right? So
Yeah.
it's getting punched in the face is very common. I actually have had to stop doing boxing because I'm old and getting punched in the face regularly is a bad idea. At a certain
Generally,
point,
yeah.
at a certain point, you don't want any more concussions.
Yeah, those tend to not do well for wanting to be able to write. CM, how about yourself?
I've been in what I would say is half of a fight.
Ooh,
meaning
half a fight.
I was at a party where an idiot that wanted to go in and see somebody who was in there who did not want to see them decided to randomly sucker punch me. And when I finally was like, what the hell, like a bunch of other people had pushed him away. And then he got back in his car and drove off and tore off all the ground effects on the bottom of his Mustang because he was drunk and hit the curb.
Brother.
So I think I won that fight, even though I didn't get to swing. So yeah, I'm pretty much the opposite of Tao with that. I've never done any training. I think YouTube Tai Chi is to the extent of mine, which is not fighting.
You have an amazing story, so that works out well. Jack.
Not in informal context, I don't think. I think when I was very young and when I was in sort of primary school, as we call it in Ireland, only about 7 or 8, in an effort. I wasn't very popular at all, and I think that was my fault. I think I had a lot of growing up to do, and in an effort to make some friends, I joined a karate dojo and found out that perhaps not the best environment to make friends, and yet an oddly suitable one. I do remember that kind of, and there is this idea that forged in, the crucible of combat, you can make some lasting acquaintances. I don't know anyone from there yet. Still, but yeah, that's as close as I've come to really any sort of pugnacious back and forth, and I'm kind of glad of that, really.
That's good. Yeah, that's really good.
Casually using a word that needs to be looked up.
Pugnacious.
I know the word, but I haven't heard anyone use that in speech. And it's very
it's something related to the dogs, I think.
Doing it. He just looks like Jack. You're like, well, I don't hate you. Plenty of time to get in a fight. Yeah. I also just wanted to say in general, like the community showing up is so much more than it used to be during these. It's really cool how like Geneva and everyone's creating this community. It's an honor to be here. Yeah, I've been in a fight and I've been punched in the face a lot. One time I fought my ex-boss and his 2 dogs.
Wow.
And I beat his ass.
This sounds like the chapter of a lit RPG novel. I think I actually did a chapter about that at one point.
I did not want to do any of it, and then it just kept happening. So I got him. I did some punches back, and I got him in a guillotine, and I told him to stop, or I would choke him out.
Wow.
So he stopped.
Wow.
Which means I like ground stuff. I like jujitsu. I don't really like punching in the face. It makes me feel like, oh, it's mean. Boxing's okay with gloves. I don't know. It feels different when it's bare fist. It feels like, ooh.
What type of dogs? Did
okay, it was the big, huge one with the fluffy hair. That's a shepherd dog, but they're fucking massive, and a French bulldog.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
They made me bleed, but he did not.
Now, I do have to ask, was he your ex-boss after the fight or before the fight?
It was a really shady situation. I used to make bad decisions as a 20-year-old. So I worked for a pot shop, and then I was going to help him grow, and it was sort of legal. It was and then he didn't want to pay me.
Oh man.
So then things got sticky.
Wow.
I don't want to say anything else incriminating. I'm done.
That's okay. Yeah, no, fair enough. Let's not try and incriminate ourselves on this. Okay, so
I'm a lady.
Aoife, how about you?
I'll preface this with I was not a mad, rebellious teenager. Just keep that in mind when I tell this story. So I was going to like this disco. It's a Grove. It's all heavy metal stuff that they play. And well, you can't drink in there. We'd bought a couple of cans of like Scrumpy Jack before, and I'm walking up the road with my pals with a plastic bag with the Scrumpy Jack in it, and somebody grabbed it. And this wasn't just me; it was like for my friends as well. So like I will fight for other people quicker than I will for myself. And yeah, he just all I could hear is he's going, "Give me the bag! I'll cut you! I'll cut you!" And of course, I just stupidly held on to the bag, and he literally was cutting at the bag. I started kicking him with my dock boots. I was wearing docks, and I just kept kicking him in the ass. And he eventually cut to get the drink. He actually had to cut the bag, the plastic bag, and ran off. And yeah, I was grand for about 5 minutes, and then I just went, "Oh my God, what did I just do?" So that and then probably I had no formal training at that stage. But when I went to college, I just, my brother, everything that he did, he was big into Bruce Lee. He did, he went to a Taekwondo club. I just was like, I want to join. There was a Kung Fu club in college, and I joined it, got sparred in there. That's actually where I met my husband. He was really nice to me. And there was other people who weren't so nice. I did get a few kicks in the head and things like that, but I survived. I'm here. Yeah, so.
That is awesome. You guys have some crazy stories. This is fantastic. I'm so happy I asked this question. And by the way, docks are like the best shoe to be wearing if you're going to be kicking someone's ass.
Yeah.
I got to say, that's just,
yeah, I've
aside
still got
from like
them.
a steel-toed military boot, that's about as good as you can get. Awesome. Thank you so much for telling me that. That is so cool. It makes me feel so happy. I want to know from your guys' perspective. By the way, I should say, if anyone does have any questions in the audience that you would like them to answer about this topic, or maybe some side topics that we find particularly interesting, go ahead and put those in the chat and we'll try to get to them. Otherwise, what I would like to know from you is maybe your process of how you have decided to, as it were, choreograph your fights in your books. Do you have a specific process? Do you concern yourself about staging, and how much planning goes into the fights that you write into your books? Aoife, let's start with you. Aoife.
So yeah, no worries.
I keep on wanting to say Aoife. I think it's fun, but I think I should say Aoife.
That's fine. I'm cool with nicknames and all sorts, so work away. Yeah, so I take it from kind of two aspects. So the storytelling aspects, and then obviously like the technical stuff. So like for the storytelling, I feel like it, especially if you're starting out like a book one, if this is the start of a series, you're introducing a main character. You need to look at what the character's like, who your readers are, what are their expectations, and you make a promise to the reader of like, this is epic fantasy, or this is urban fantasy, or whatever your setting is, and what the tone of the story is. Is it like, is it grim? Is it lighthearted, slice of life? You can have action fight scenes in any of them. So it's being consistent and being true to who if it is a fight, the first fight scene, say with the main character, that if, it needs to kind of reflect who they are. So are they the type of, character that's going to go in all guns blazing at the start? Are they reluctant to fight? So that will all, and what is their power like physically, if like in lit RPG, have they got skills, where are they, and who are they fighting? So I'd look at all of those and what the stakes are, so the fight has to matter. It has to have a meaning and drive the plot forward. Again, I suppose there's no absolutes as such, but I'd look at that, and then I suppose there's the technical stuff which, you know, you're looking at, you know, your pacing, what sort of language are you using, action words, you know, trying to avoid passive voice. Again, not necessarily absolutely. I like the example in the early days, like it took me so long to write a fight scene, like, you know, I'd just be agonizing over it. But like things are just looking at, you know, like if you can add the word by zombies at the end of it, like you might be slowing the pace down a bit. Yeah, so I'd look at that, and I think, I don't know, I will stop there before I keep rambling.
No, that was great. That was really great. Rose?
Yeah, I'll just try to build off of that a little bit. A fight scene should like propel the character every single time, or the plot / story, but everything in the story / plot should propel the character, right? So the fight scenes need to matter, and that also dictates, like Aoife said, it dictates sort of like what you want from it. I just wrote one for my upcoming book where the main character gets access to a body that's not ill and is really strong, and he had quite a bit of training, but when you don't have a body to do the thing that you want to do, it's not very effective. And so the guy went to do like a clumsy stab, and he like grabbed his wrist and pulled him into an elbow, and it was just a simple move. But because he was like 6'2" and magically enhanced, he shattered the guy's face and broke his neck and was like, oh, and it was over, right? And it was, he needed to kill him because this is whatever, it was whatever. But I love that too, where like how it ends should do something. Yeah, sometimes you really need the bad guy to get his ass kicked for a long time, or the good guy needs to get brought low, and you need these long fight scenes. And then there's also something delicious and violent and truthful and disgusting and disturbing about someone dying very quickly, because bodies can also be upsettingly fragile.
That's a good way of putting it, upsettingly fragile. I like that.
Yeah. I still don't think I answered your question, but we'll just keep asking random questions, and we'll talk a lot about fight scenes.
I liked it. I liked your response. I thought that was really interesting and some good perspective. Jack, what about you? Do you take a lot of time to think about your fight scenes when you're writing?
Absolutely, Steve. And I must say I found Rose and Aoife's answers terribly engaging, insofar as I think along the same lines. The characterful quality is paramount, and the advancement of that, and also the narrative versus technical elements of a fight, that's terribly important to think about as well, when you're approaching a fight scene from a structural point of view and the nitty-gritty moments of style. Something perhaps that I can add is implicit versus explicit. Often when I approach a fight scene, such as in my first novel, Scarlet Citadel, there are scenes where a blow by blow and a moment of visceral, what's going to happen next, a character right on the cusp of disaster, overcoming it, just about what happens, and that moment can be pulled out to as a kind of examining the biome, and you can see exactly the geography of the fight. The reader might think in such a moment, wait, okay, so that was established earlier. There's a furnace grate and they're fighting by the furnace grate. Could the hero, and yes, they chunk up the furnace grate, the heat comes rolling out, and at that point, it could be the hero or the villain about to go in. That can be terribly engaging. And that's very explicit writing. You're right in the bones of the scene. You're establishing the geography, etc. It's really good stuff. But sometimes the reader can be perfectly happy to do the work themselves with implicit. To draw an example from classical literature, I don't know how many of you have read The Princess Bride, but there are some terrific fight scenes, most of which are rooted in the characters saying something like, well, you are using Benatiste's defense against me, huh? And they say, I thought it fitting considering the rocky terrain. And that's really engaging because the audience can go, I kind of want to know what Benatiste's defense is. And the mind will just fill in that gap. For example, what I would do in Scarlet Citadel might be, there's a fight scene where a character called Mr. Glint, he's a terribly terribly wretched character, the kind of guy who would track down a mother spider and devour it, just to lap up her squirming young. Just a dreadful creature. But the way he would approach a fight scene is, I can't really show that too engagingly because he's probably going to win against certainly building up to the final conflict. So the audience doesn't need to have their time wasted, rather to get a cool impression of the character. So when Mr. Glint closes a door and says, and the final line of that passage might be something like Mr. Glint saying, "You look like you taste like raspberry sorbet," and the door closes, then the audience can go, "Oh," and then maybe some blood seeping out under the door. And that's all. That's implicit, and you can do the work yourself. So it's all about that. Anyway, sorry, I've gone on way too long.
That was just casually really hot, Jack.
Yeah.
Gravelly mold.
How are you not narrating your own books with
There's
that?
people
My word.
watching this.
Yeah, that was brilliant. Very interesting. CM, how about yourself?
I don't think I necessarily choreographed directly. I kind of find the intent of the scene, which for me, especially the ones I've been writing the last couple of days, have been heavily influenced by the fact that the Griff, my main character, has acquired a bunch of new powers recently. I like the thing that attracted me to this genre, I think, was the finding ways to synergize different powers that don't seem like they go together to create like moments where people go, "Holy crap, that was cool." So that's what I like when I'm reading this genre or watching movies or whatever. So it's kind of my main focus, and not having a background in any actual martial arts or anything, I don't get into the technical because I just make a fool of myself. Griff uses a spear, so I did watch a crap ton of spear fighting videos and people like on YouTube and some couple movies here and there just to get the kind of feel for it. But I don't think if you read my fight scenes, you're never going to go, "Oh, that's the whatever technique or something," because I don't even know what the hell those are. So I think when I approach it, I just like finding, I kind of know what the end is before I get there.
Right.
That's kind of my thing with my books too. I always know where I'm going. I just don't necessarily know how I'm going to get there. And I let the scene kind of tell itself and let me figure out ways of using the abilities in an interesting way. That's my main approach.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. Tao?
I mean, everyone's covered the technical aspects, the plot, how we all instinctively kind of build on these fight scenes. I'm mostly a pantser, so I don't actively think about these things, but as part of my brain that is always doing the math on all of these aspects that we need to do. Because I've got my background, I do have a bit more technical in portions in my fight scenes. I talk about things like measure, angles, things, whether you've got a strong or a weak in a blade, aspects, or I might explicitly call out a specific thing. When you've got too much information, I think the biggest challenge is trying to dumb it down and make the pacing right. Otherwise, it becomes just a giant piece of, it's a manual for fighting, which some people can do well. Mouth Cameron actually has a series that is really well done in that sense. But in general, you do have to kind of summarize things quickly. I did want to go and mention just quickly about The Princess Bride. 1 second, let me just deal with this.
There was somebody that I think doing some...
Sorry, they seem to be cleaning something outside. Just closed up the window. The Princess Bride, one of the things that they actually mentioned, that they're calling out all the names of the various masters. They are actual fencing masters. However, if you watch the movies, what they do is completely different and completely off. And you can't actually, call out a specific defense and whatnot. It doesn't really work like that in fencing. So it's a fun trivia thing, but it is not actually what happens or what they used in the movies. The other thing that I think no one's mentioned is terrain. We always forget, and I mean, watch any Jackie Chan show, and he uses terrain so well, and I think a lot of us forget to use that to make an action scene or bog standard one more interesting. Stick your character inside an elevator, and then the fight becomes very different compared to an open dueling land where the ground is perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or throw in a ladder somewhere or whatever. Yeah, that's always very interesting. I find this, I actually asked to narrate this panel because I find this incredibly interesting and important as a narrator, because when I'm trying to speak about these scenes, something that someone just reads, and there was a comment that was made, and I will try and get on this question. You touched on it a little bit, Tao, about when a fight is dragging on too long, I find myself skipping paragraphs or pages. How do you keep them engaging or keep them from dragging on for too long? So that's something that I find is very important. And one of the things that as a narrator, I'm trying to do, and I wanted to get your guys' perspective on it, or how much you've thought about this, is when I'm pre-reading, and then sometimes even when I'm in the booth, then narrating it again, and what I have to do for my narration in order for me to be able to convey something effectively, I need to be able to visualize it in my mind. Because if I can see it in my head as if I'm acting it out, it seems to translate that much easier to the audience that this is what's going on. Because if it doesn't make sense to me, how is it going to make sense when I'm speaking it? And I've found that there are some authors who I'm doing the fight scene, and then all of a sudden someone who is magically in my mind box of where everyone is, they were over in this left-hand corner, and now suddenly they're crouching down over here. And I'm like, no, that doesn't make sense with my brain. And so when you're doing your fight scenes, how concerned are you, or do you take the time to ensure that, okay, I'm going to plot this out and I'm going to have this person here? And do you do like a storyboard? Do you do action figures that you move around to have it go through? Or is there something else that you do to try and keep that continuity together? Rose, you seem like you want to start that one off.
I was going to tease you. Steve, that was an 8-minute question. What the fuck do you want me to say? What you say, F? What do we do to make it engaging? What do we do to keep a fight from being boring, right?
No. What do you, how concerned are you? How do you process choreographing the scene? Do you physically or mentally choreograph the scene to place everyone, stage them? Do you draw? Do you whatever?
Got it. And I love you, Steve. I'm sorry. I'm just teasing. I showed up with the snark today.
Professionally talks too much. That's what I have there. There's a reason why that's there.
It depends on, sometimes it's real easy to see, like the character opens up a door and there's like several people standing in front of them. What's that noise? What's going on? Anyway, there's someone opens up the door in a tavern and someone's about to jump them, and he just kicks them straight in the sternum and then runs. You don't have to think about that. It's very simple in your head. But when I wrote the catch the wrist, pull, and break the guy's face, I stood up and did it because I wanted to make sure I described where to catch the wrist right, just because I was having trouble physically visualizing. It just sort of depends on the scene. But yeah, sometimes I straight up just get up and do it. That's real fun. And other times you're like, wait, I can't practice that because I can't leap 20 feet in the air and summon flame with my kick, right? Like, so magic changes how physics work, and then that changes how your combat works, because certain martial arts won't be pragmatic in real life, but if you have the power to like cut a tree in half with a punch, then you can do a lot of different things. It's really fun that way.
Mm-hmm. Jack, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, in terms of, one of the things you brought up was from the initial question was the question of skipping paragraphs. I think generally a good rule, less is more. When there's a great moment during the appendices of Lord of the Rings, which I have watched perhaps too many times, where they talk about the Battle of Helm's Deep in The Two Towers, the second film. And when they're editing the battle, they realize that 27 minutes long is a lot more exciting than 35 minutes long. And Peter Jackson had to figure out And that's the key phrase, figure out. It's all about texture. You will feel, I think, when you're writing, or perhaps when you're reading as well, God, this is really dragging. This is going on too long. Less can be more. When a character is shot, the disintegration of their jaw and then cut can often be a lot better than drawing things out. Then in terms of geography, biome and placement, I love that question because I play D&D a lot, and I have since college, and I didn't have the money for incredibly expensive figures or terrain, although I would have loved it, and I really respect people who can kind of build such incredible ecosystems in a physical space for their TTRPGs. But for me, I had to learn to describe to the table, because I was DMing, I had to learn to describe things with a good sense of kinetic motion and keep things flowing, because and also to keep track of where people were exactly. But if you don't have a good sense of movement, if there isn't a good sense of motion, players will check out. There needs to be that sense of dynamism, or else there is a kind of a slippage away. People aren't necessarily in an action film for trench warfare. They're there for constant movement, ebb and flow. But yeah, it's all choice. It's all texture.
That's awesome. Aoife, do you have anything to add to this?
I'm just
It's
taking
okay
all.
if you don't. Yeah.
Yeah, no. I suppose I could talk from a co-author point of view of what myself and Rachel do might be useful, and our more recent conundrum. So, like, if it's like what everybody else has been saying? So, if it's a simpler kind of scene, it's just, maybe two people involved. You can kind of, work it out as you go. Bringing more elements into play. So, for example, we have this in our tower, we have this battle box. It's kind of inspired a little bit by Pokemon, kind of gameplay. But so we can have a player versus player, but we also have a kind of a melee, almost battle royale sort of thing. And it is hell to choreograph, which I have realized, because we have so many characters. They all have these like mad orbs that they can fight, which have all different affinities, and so much stuff going on. I am very detail oriented. I'm not the global big picture thinking. Rachel anchors me with all of that. She will help organize and get things in flow. So what we tend to do if we're struggling with things is that we'll actually be on a call together and actually dialogue it out, or do the bare bones of it, like a skeleton, almost like what's at the dirty first draft, but by chapter. Right. And if it's a fight scene, the same concept still applies. As regards making it engaging, again, I think it can be done depending on what the tone of the story is, again. But on a personal level, I love again where the stakes are, you can see that there is something going to change the character or characters before the fight happens. It's almost like, Muhammad Ali, when he'd get in the ring, like he's psyched out that character or that his opponent before the match. He's won that match before it's even being played out. And I love to see a kind of a build up of that. I'm not saying I can emulate that in my writing yet, but I love to feel that sense, or that, like what you see in like horror stories as well, where you can see things they are getting worse and worse and worse. And it's not necessarily if he will win, it's how the hell is he going to win, given those odds. So I think that's one way to kind of to hook the reader in, have a question there, just like you do in any other part of the story, but done within the mechanics of a fight scene. It can be done. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, very good insight. CM, yourself with your spear fights, when you're doing that, because it's not something that you're innately experienced with, as you said, do you take a little bit more time to do you have a spear at home that you try and move around or choreograph what you're going to be doing?
I both wish and I'm thankful I do not, because I would probably skewer myself before anybody else. I'm not a big choreographer. I tend to like Mike was saying earlier, I know the ending, the intent of where I got to get to, and then I try to figure out interesting ways with setbacks, adjust to the setback, another setback, and then it builds to what is hopefully a satisfying conclusion. And I think the best way that I've found in my writing to avoid the lulls and longer fights, because there are some long fights, is my books have a lot of internal dialogue, as well as the adventure group has a telepathic link, so they can constantly be in communication. And I would say at least 3 of the members of my main party are kind of idiots. They're not stupid, but they're just jackasses. So if I feel like it's getting a little bit of a slog, I just toss in a humorous line, or something where one of the doofuses does something that is not advantageous to the fight, and kind of like, what the hell are you doing, you moron? That sometimes needs somebody else to cover them, or basically can be one of those setbacks. It can be as simple as that. And I don't generally pay a lot of attention to where everybody else but the main character is, because I don't generally say, so and so's over here or so and so's over there, unless the actual scene requires it. So it's just more of a focused on Griff, the main character, as well as where his attention goes in the fight, while all the other people are just kind of doing their thing. And the only time I really reference what they're doing is if I come up with something cool or it's relevant to the plot. Otherwise, the end of result is what is important in there for the other characters, at least in my mind.
Right. That's very good. Yeah, and it makes sense, especially if you have one character that you're specifically trying to keep track of. It can be a little bit cumbersome to, like, here's this person and this person, because I imagine that could be what drags a story or a chapter down in a fight, when you're trying to direct everyone and talk about what everyone's doing at the same time. Tao, how about you? Do you spend a lot of time choreographing?
Sort of. I mean, everything. I grew up watching a lot of action movies, so I see a lot of my fight scenes as, little movie clips that I'm going through. I do coordinate, what, if I'm trying to describe a specific motion in the beginning, I always, try to figure out what I'm doing. So sometimes I'll be kind of sitting there going, right, that's what I would do. And then, I'd play it out and I'd write it out. Part of that is, and the confusion that people get is the fact that you don't set the scene, right? How you describe the location, whether it's at the beginning of your chapter, and then just a quick reminder before you start the fight scene, can make a big difference to not throwing people out of the fight itself. So if you start describing a place, a ballroom, for example, and you don't mention the chandeliers, which the hero is going to be swinging from, that might be a problem. But you don't have to go and make that very explicit. You can start that as the beginning of the chapter, where the guy is going, oh, hey, look at those beautiful chandeliers, with their 1,000 golden crystals, blah, 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 lots of conversation. And then you get to him swinging off it. It doesn't come as a surprise anymore for anyone else. So that's one of the things that you can do to set the scene. With multiple characters, I agree with Chris. I don't do a lot of individual things unless it comes a little bit depending on how experienced your character is at fighting, and what you want to do. It's a genre thing too, right? A very experienced person has a lot more time, is able to see a lot more of a battlefield or in a fight than someone who's thrown into it in the first time. All they can see and do is very small. It's very immediate, and very often they can't even tell what's happening. They're just reacting. It's very different if you talk to people who have been at it for a long enough time. Time seems to stretch, and so you can see and do a lot more things in that same amount of objective time, if you will. Not one of the things, obviously, summarizing things, going, hey, he threw a flurry of blows, rather than playing out every single action can help speed things up quite often, especially if there's no point to a lot of those actions, because it's no one's getting injured or nothing major has happened. But the other side of the equation, for me, partly to build tension, but to keep the readers grounded, is I use the various senses, right? If someone gets punched, he tastes the blood in his mouth, right? He smells, he can smell the blood too, or, his nose is clogged up, he can't breathe anymore. You can talk about those things, and it grounds the reader and keeps the tension level much higher, which keeps it more interesting than just a discussion of every single physical motion that they do, because that's not what people are in there for. It's grounding them in the story and the emotions behind it, which is how you get tension in many cases.
So, quick question for all of you. You don't have to give a big response unless you have a great story about it, but just a nod or a wave or a hand or whatever. How many of you have struggled with, how many different ways can I say suddenly when you're doing a fight scene and trying to suddenly this happened, because everything in a fight scene happens so fast. You're like, he instantly did this, and then at the same time this happened, and suddenly, and it's just like, is that a struggle for anyone, or just
you shouldn't use that word a lot at all? You really should. You should be careful with suddenlies and thens. That's just technical.
So I know, but is that something that you guys have to battle yourselves with, or is that just so innately easy for you guys to be able to do that? Was all that was.
I find myself using a moment later a lot, and to the point where I've got to start finding other phrases. I don't think I really ever use suddenly. I guess I probably agree with Rose. It's not a word when I see it in books, I'm kind of like, it's just not what I use. So
every author has the quirks that they have to constantly work to get rid of. And if you don't, then you're a bad author and you're just putting them straight in your book. It's like for me, I have to fight. I cut 90% of my thens. And then instead of a moment later, it's like half a heartbeat later or half a second later, or whatever that you're trying to show some sort of time delay. But there's usually ways to do it if you use creative craft to imply time instead of saying this amount of time happened. That's not, but yeah, it's like a constant process of saying, stop writing that.
Yeah. I noticed, to pick on I feel like it's okay to pick on him. Early on in Brandon Sanderson's writing, if you read any of his earlier stuff, in Elantris or whatever, and then a few others, everyone paused all the time. Everyone was pausing so much. And I was like, there's so much pausing happening. And then later on, I did see that the pauses stopped and everyone was not pausing nearly as much as he grew and developed. So what you're exactly talking about. And so I'm curious to know, is there a phrase or a word or something that you guys noticed either early in your writing or that you're still fighting against that you have a tendency to fall back on? That you're like, I should probably, it doesn't even have to do with fighting, but was there a phrase that you used a lot, or that a word that you used a lot that you're like, I didn't realize I used that as much as I do. I need to trim that back.
There's a lot of sighing and snarling in my books.
He sighed, she sighed, they sighed. That's awesome.
In my character Griff, I realized this in this book, so I got to go back and see if I did in other ones, that his eyes widen a lot. And I actually made a joke on it where he's like, maybe I should choose to do something else. He's like, nah. So that's not going to be like the excuse for keeping him in there, but I just thought it was kind of funny. So I'll have to go and maybe even type in the universal search eyes widened and see if I've got more than 12, it's probably a problem.
I won't call them out, but I actually worked on a book where during my Discord recording, we were tempted to play a drinking game of taking a drink every time the character's eyes widened, and realized that we would have had alcohol poisoning almost immediately. So I can very much appreciate that one. That's a really good one. So anyone else have a phrase, or do you want to move on to another question?
I probably have many of them, and I'd say it's some influence on Hiberno English as well, like coming from. So again, Rachel probably, she's picks them up. She's used to me, but just or. I don't tend to do it as much now in writing. I will pick it up and we will get these in editing, but like after doing something, it's going more into kind of passive type things like that, or smirked. Every time I see that, my eye twitches. So it's yeah, as Rose is saying, just being aware of it and working to improve. So
yeah, I like that one. I like Chris's one. I like the character in a constant state of shock, like, oh golly. I think one for myself would be cold. The word cold, when you're writing in a wintertime kind of aspect, or if you're dealing with characters who experience a lot of fear, there's a great deal of heroism in my writing, and there's a great deal of conflict and pushing back against it and finding bravery in that fear. But it means encountering fear itself, and in moments of helplessness, some characters can become drenched in that moment of desperation. And let's say, for example, we have a character who is sketching a starling in Scarlet Citadel, and he's sketching the starling out on his balcony, and he's enjoying the act of it very much, and he's talking to it a little bit, he's meditative kind of drawing, and then he gets a feeling, and he looks up, and the starling is gone, and on the balcony are some bloody drops, and the drops are coming from the beak of a much larger bird. And that bird doesn't seem natural at all. It's a nightjar, but grotesquely huge. And what else can you say in such a situation other than, cold pinpricks of fear moved along him, or he felt like his gut was packed with ice cubes. Cold is a word that I've run into a great deal and that I try to be disciplined about when I can.
That's awesome. I particularly am excited for this one. I hope that you guys have some great responses. I'm sure you will. One of the questions that came in from the audience was, what is your favorite fight scene you've read? So it can be one that you've written yourself or one that you've read from someone else, but what is one that stands out to you or one that you really enjoyed? So, Jack, you seem like so we'll let everyone else kind of think, and you can give us yours.
I mean, it's easy, Steve. It's so easy. It should be everyone's if they've read the book. It's A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms by George Martin. It is the character of Dunk facing off in the Trial of the Seven. So, okay, I won't spoil that story too much, but we have the most unjust circumstances wrought on our poor, hapless Sir Duncan the Tall. And he is so eminently likable as a character. And it carries in all the things that these fabulous people here so articulately have been saying. It's characterful. We have a great sense of the scenery. We have a great sense of the narrative and technical stakes of things because it's a joust, right? And we know the rules of jousting, and we know that this is not like the joust from before, that it's actually a deadly situation. There's no honor here. It's more about proving innocence. And it's incredible. So tense, so dynamic. And the ending, for anyone who hasn't read it, immensely satisfying for those characterful reasons that Rose brought up at the start of this. It's so tense and yet so brilliantly satisfying. Oh, so good.
That's a good one. CM?
I've been trying to think of an actual single fight, and I don't know if I've got one, so I'm going to kind of cheat a little bit and say that I think Will White in his Cradle series does a great job of keeping very long, sometimes fight scenes interesting, without even giving like a lot of details. Like the one thing that sometimes made me go was when he would name all these techniques, and if I didn't remember what they were, I'd be like, well, what the hell's that thing? Excuse me. But I rarely find myself bored and then realize that I read like 15, 20 pages of a fight scene. So I think that might be one of the reasons that series is popular. It's because a lot of fight scenes, sometimes you're just like, okay, you could have shortened this down, or was it necessary? But I think I've enjoyed his more than a lot of others. And otherwise, I'm just going completely blank because I have a crap-ass memory, and which is not necessarily good for my job, but so I guess that's my sort of answer.
That's what spreadsheets and notes are for, right?
Yes.
To help us with that stuff. Aoife?
I'm awful at picking favorites. I'm just going to say, in general, within the genre, cultivation in general, I love those type of fight scenes. And I love the whole kind of like the aftermath as well, usually where, you know, it's very explicit. It's almost like kind of going into the anime style of thing. You know, it's like, before I couldn't do this and now I can do that. And I love also when it's listening to it, because I would listen to Whisper Sync. So I'll be reading and listening at the same time. So I'm getting basically all the sensory stuff, and I love all of that. If I was to think of something I've read probably when I was younger, I love from The Lord of the Rings, when, what was it? Do you remember, what was it? Riddles in the Dark. It's not so much a fight scene, but like when that whole kind of conflict came about, and like what it led to eventually. So I think that would be probably just more from a nostalgic point of view.
Aoife, that's such a good point. Like fight scenes that are delivered via words rather than, and with the threat of violence. That's such a good point.
Yeah, it's a foreshadowing. So yeah, I love that.
Very cool. Rose.
Yeah, I got two. I'll try and be quick. I'm gonna do a George R. R. Martin one too, just because he wrote some really good shit in his the first three books I'm in love with. There's a scene where Tyrion gets captured and he chooses trial by combat to get out. And then there's this big fight between valiant, honorable, and highly skilled knight in full plate armor versus Tyrion's nasty, thug, honorless piece of shit who takes off all of his armor and fights with a smaller sword. And he slowly picks the knight apart and gets little punctures here and there, and he systematically murders this motherfucker and then walks away. And afterward, Tyrion owes him a favor. So it's political. It's three different characters being displayed at the same time, and like a lesson on violence and brutality. It was wild. Like one scene, and I was like, ugh. Yeah. And then I'll do a general one. It's not a specific, but like in like Once Upon a Time in China, or like Ip Man, when the master comes out, when he, you know, there's like Donnie Yen always plays the I choose not to fight character, and he keeps doing that, and then motherfucker like slaps a chick or beats up his protege, or like kills another master who's old, and then we get the master coming out and going, all right bitches, and he wrecks shop. Oh, it's so good. It's worth every kung fu film. Juicy. I just got goosebumps.
That's awesome. Tao, how about you?
I'm gonna pick two actually. Very quickly.
Sure.
Miles Cameron writes a series called, the first book is called Cold Iron, and he does it's he writes with longsword work mostly, and it's just every single fight scene you can read it and you can picture every single motion that is going through, and they're very, because it's a realistic world, the fights are generally super fast, relatively speaking, right? It's not a lot of backplay and fall, so you can do these plays and then you look through it and go, holy shit, I know exactly what play he did. Or well, if you're me, have the background, or you can just picture everything that he did to go and get there. And I was talking to Miles, and he was literally going, "Yeah, they're all plays. What I'm doing with those." So really well written, incredible pacing. The other one that I wanted to shout out on the opposite side of it, which is all magic, is John Bierce's Mage Errant, I think 4 or 5. The entire, well, 3/4 of the book is one giant fight scene. And it's engrossing. Like you're reading through the whole book going, holy shit, because it's all multiple battles across, basically it's a war going on. And so you're just following this giant battle with 4 or 5 different main characters, plus a few side characters, each of them having their own little battles in there, all of them mages, right? So it's a completely different format. Like John does it so well in that series.
That's very cool. I have to, because I called him out, I have to mention as an honorable mention, Brandon Sanderson in the Mistborn series. If you don't know about it, so cool. And the way he uses the push and pull of the metals that he's working with, and how he describes those fight scenes and the battles between them doing that, I found brilliant, because it was so easy for me to visualize it in my mind. It felt a little bit sort of like watching The Matrix mentally. So I had to put a little quick shout out to him on that. Okay, we're getting close to being done on our time. We have about 5 minutes left. So what we'll try and do is let's handle one more question and 2 more questions, because I'm hoping one's going to be really fast. And then we will get each of you to let us know where people can find you if they're looking for your stuff and wanting to know more about how you handle fight scenes specifically and getting to enjoy those. So the real quick question, or let's start with this first question here first, is do you have a fight editor that you talk to when you're finished writing a book? If so, does that come in the copy editing or during the creative editing? So we'll leave it. If you don't, no worries. But if you do, raise your hand and we'll grab you. You do. Okay.
I would just say really quickly that like all of my homies, you call up a friend and you're like, yo, can I rap with you? And you just sort of spit your story there. But no, I don't have a specific editor. And if you were going to do something like that, you should definitely do it early on in dev or creative. I would call it dev editing. But copy you should be done by copy.
Great answer. Anyone else? We're good? Okay, so the very quick question, hopefully, is from Rachel. Very important question for Rose. Who would win in a fight, me or Jack?
Jack's the sweetest person on the panel. I don't think Jack could fight anyone. He would cry, and it would be really poetic. He'd say a few words that were long, and then Rachel would like cut him in half with a sword, and it'd be like, oh,
dude, Rose, you nailed it. Rachel would kill me. She wouldn't even be close.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Okay, Tao, why don't you start us off with telling us where people can find you?
The usual places, Amazon, Audible. You can find out a lot of details about my books or what I'm releasing under my website for Starlit Publishing, starletpublishing.com. And I also have my own personal blog, which is under mylifemytao.com.
Awesome. CM.
I'm currently on as Tao said, the usual places. I do have a website at cmcarneywrites.com, but it's antiquated because I'm in the process of going to set up a store at some point, so I haven't really been paying attention to that. Other than that, the upcoming Kickstarters or the Facebook group I have, which is just CM Carney's Book Room, which is also the name of my publishing company, which is kind of a joke because I said I wanted a book room when I grew up, and my mom's like, they call those libraries. So, but that's pretty much where I am.
That's awesome. Jack.
Hey, I'm Jack Fields. I write the Walking Shadow series, and you can find me on Amazon, where Scarlet Citadel has been released. The audiobook is upcoming. And yeah, thank you so much for hosting the panel, Steve. Appreciate it.
Do you have any socials that people can follow you on?
Yeah, Facebook and stuff, but and TikTok, I guess, but mostly go to Amazon, buy the book, have a good time.
Okay, Rose.
Yeah, I want to say thanks to Steve again too. It was nice. I don't get enough Steve time these days, but Rose Reynolds, I write under and publish under TJ Reynolds. If you want spicier stuff, Atlas Kane, but be warned. Yeah, I'm on Amazon. I'm on Facebook, Discord too, but you have to be cool to get my Discord handle. This is how it works. No, thank you all. It was a really fun panel.
Appreciate it. Aoife. Oh my gosh.
Aoife. No worries. Sorry, I'm just always struggling for the mute button. I'm like multitasking not good. So you can find myself and Rachel. She organizes everything. So we actually have a website, unchartedbloodlines.com. There is a link. And also we have I think it's just got up there, a Titan's Core on Royal Road. And we're on Twitch usually twice a week, plotting, world domination Tuesdays and Thursdays, and kind of my afternoon. So it's about 4:00 Irish time. I don't know. That's probably 11 EST. I don't know. 4:30 usually. Yeah. So that's where you can find us.
Awesome. Thank you so much to each of you for taking time out of your day to be on this panel and to talking to us about fight scenes and choreography and all of that stuff. I appreciate it, for your engagement, for your willingness to chat with us, and to everyone else in YouTube land, thank you so much for hanging out with us and some great questions. I appreciate it. Hope you enjoy the rest of the Guild Con, and have a great afternoon. Ciao for now.
See you guys.
Bye.
Awkward wave
Bye.
time. Awkward wave.